Hello, mentors. Welcome to meeting 1 in sequence. This is the first meeting of spring, and it will be in April 10. Make sure you know your room, depending on which school you're mentoring. And so this is the agenda. We'll have 2 big parts. The first one is called Foundations, and it's about half an hour. And then after the break, and maybe some special announcement, which may occur before or after, but hopefully right after the break, we'll have some activities relating to sequences, mathematical sequences, and this will be 25 minutes or so, followed by a closure. What do we look for in this meeting? So here are the main concepts or goals. So we want to describe patterns, numerical patterns. We want to analyze mathematical sequences, like these abstract or general properties of a sequence without going too deep, because we don't have much time, but getting a lot of exposure of students to what a sequence is and what patterns they could follow, etc. In particular, we'll be looking at arithmetic sequences and Fibonacci sequences, which means there's a usual Fibonacci sequence, but there's more Fibonacci sequences. The ones that you just start with any 2 numbers, and then the next one is the sum of the previous 2, and so on. So that concept. And then from an enrichment and cultural point of view, we want to really bond with students for the first time for some of you. Some of you are returning, so keep bonding with the students, giving students voice in terms of culture, in terms of personal settings, in terms of relations, in terms of course, the math. So giving them a lot of voice so that they have a really footprint in the meeting. So this is far from tutoring or a lecture, because actually you're centering your teaching in the students. Also setting expectations, because this is the first meeting. So we really need to set the expectations for the whole quarter. And finally, working as a team. In particular, we'll make sure that this is a strong message. So let's take a look. And this is the teaching guide, what I'm showing. So you can, of course, read more and watch the videos. So this is about co-mentoring, gives some nice little tips. These are more goals that you can read. And so part 1, foundations, splits also into 3 different activities. The warm welcome, which is very short. Our pledge, which is the expectations. And finally, a team bonding or team building game called Towers. So these 3 parts. And again, you can read about it here. And then after part 1, then we have a break. And after the break, we have part 2, which is sequences, which again splits into 2 activities. The first, the sharing flower part, which is to collectively build sequences while sharing things, cultural things about ourselves. And there's a video on the sharing flower, so you can take a look later. And then the next one, number 2, discover them. It's optional based on whether you have time or not. So you can tell students to do it as a take home. So that's totally fine. So let's take a look at the very end of this teaching guide. You will find the student workbook. So we'll provide these student workbooks during the Wednesday meeting. This has 7 pages in particular, and this is the table of contents, so the activities. So your students will be looking at this. And so let's quickly review these 5 activities. The first one is just introductions, quick introductions. There's not really a page in the student workbook for that, but in the teaching guide, you have some tips on how to introduce your students. So it's just a warm welcome. This should take mostly 5 minutes. You'll have more time to share during part 2 and bond with your students and learn personal things about them. Then we have the pledge, in which you will present this very quickly, these 5 items in the pledge. And then you'll interact with students and again, get their voice, which is a big part of this meeting and the whole quarter. So for example, how can I remind myself of this? Why do I come to Math CEO? These questions are activating the fact that why do we choose this pledge items. Let's first take a look at number one. I will respect the personal space. So what would another peer think or feel if I don't? So we're engaging students into reflection, brainstorming also to connect with the pledge items. Why are they important? And this is really important. We're not imposing them, but we're presenting them. Okay, so it's some expectations. We have to be clear on them, but we're also reflecting and discussing why. Why did we choose them? And what can the students add? So that's the pledge. And again, you can see the times here. Of course, we need to be flexible with times, but hopefully this should take around 10 minutes or so. Then after the pledge, you have this team building game called the Towers. So there's a reflection after the activity. And if you want to learn more about the activity, of course, you can read the teaching guide, but there's also a video that we put here just to see how it looks. After the towers, we go to the break, and the break usually takes 10 minutes or so. That's the break, and it's important. It's important for students. They may come very tired from classes, right, in the beginning. So they give them some time. You can, of course, interact with them depending on the conditions of the room and the time, but it's roughly gonna be 10 minutes. And then after the special announcement, and again, this may happen before, so we'll tell you. But let's pretend this happens right here. Let's see what this sequences is about. So let's take a look at the student workbook. First, we do this sharing flower activity in which you start with a center cup. You have a printout of these 7 aspects. For example, people you admire, or names or words that are special to you, either in Spanish or in another language. Of course, English also, but any language really. And so people are gonna collaborate, taking turns placing first a theme to start like a line or a pedal, right, for a sequence. So you start with a theme, and any numbers that you put here will involve sharing quickly something about that aspect. So for example, if I put the 2 here along with the aspects, then I have to share something. And another person may put a 2 again in a later round, share another aspect, and so on. So I put the 4. But mathematically, what's happening is that when somebody puts the 3rd card, for example, let's say here I have a 3 and a 4, and I put the 3rd card, a 6, I have to justify what's the pattern that I'm looking when I put that card. Why do I put a 6? And I cannot just say just because, or just because it's random. Here I could say my pattern will be adding 1, then adding 2. And so whoever will put this will have to put a 9, because then it's adding 3. You could also do an arithmetic sequence for A12 that grows by 4. This is Fibonacci, right? Because 4 is 2 plus 2, and 6 is 4 plus 2, and 10 is 6 plus 4. So it gets determined after the 3rd card. And then everybody's sharing. If you place a prime number, you play again. So it's kind of interesting. And these activities should take around 15 minutes or so. But remember, let's go to part 2. Remember that item 2 in part 2, it's optional. So you could be taking potentially longer than 15 minutes and just don't do this activity. So this is a flexibility. Or if the flower, you're done with it somehow, and or students look that they want more challenges, you can kind of cut to the flower, right? Cut the flower and move to this discover them part, which is the final part in the meeting, which is just a follow-up of the flower. Now we give the numbers, they're there, and students will need to take turns creating sequences out of this by connecting numbers. So I could do something along the lines of 2, 3, 5. I would need a 6, so I cannot do the add 1 and 2. Add 4. Let's see. Actually, I could do it 2, 3, I add 1. 3, 5, I add 2. Then if I pick the 8, I would add 3, right? And then I would have to add 4. So I kind of get stuck. Okay, but I got a nice sequence justifying the pattern. We're looking mainly for arithmetic sequences. For example, this that grows by 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, or Fibonacci sequences. So that's going to be more challenging to find. But in the solutions of the teaching guide, we'll illustrate how we actually have a lot of Fibonacci hidden here. For example, let's look for these 4, 1, 5, 6. It's here for 1. Those two numbers are free, are just any numbers. And then you have to add. So 4 plus 1 is 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. 6 plus 5 plus 6 is 11. So you can actually continue for a bit. A hint is to start from this, from the center, hopefully. That will get you a long way, but you can actually start anywhere. And you can go up or down in terms of the pattern. So for example, if you want to, let's take a look at this arithmetic sequence. Students could actually start with 78. Let's take a look at where that number is, 78. And then actually go down. So we actually don't go that far. Let's pick 60. Yeah, actually maybe. Oh yeah, actually 78 is here, sorry. So 78, they could then subtract to get to 69. So subtract 9, and then the student would ask, is there a 60 around here? Because they have to play adjacent, right? So even diagonal possible, 60. Okay, they would look for a 51, and they would just see how long they go. So this is the last part. So this is how the meeting should look like. Of course, in coaching, you'll learn much more. You'll be working in big tables, a lot of students. Hopefully, you'll be doing commentary. And I think the most important thing is to remember is that even if you're a new mentor, and especially if you're a new mentor, you get a lot of help from the students themselves, the returning students, from the LAs, the learning assistants, the outreach assistants, and all the teaching team that's here to really help you. So hope you have a lot of fun in the meeting, and talk to you soon. Goodbye.